So hi guys, to everyone, looking forward to our session. We will be your hosts, Katka and George, and I will start maybe with presentation about Kickstart with the additional things that next to the version, and then it will be George, and then we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. So please, anytime when we speak, you can share any of your questions in the chat, and then we will go one by one to help you, to support you in that way. So let me maybe share the screen. All right, can you see my screen?
It's loading.
Yeah?
Yep.
No? Fantastic. Cool. So for Kickstart, as you heard already from earlier presentation, we are the open innovation platform connecting corporates and startups and scale-ups, and we are spin-off of Impact Hub Zurich. We are working on the, I would say, connections to create I would say meaningful partnerships in as a proof of concepts of commercial projects. So it's kind of through innovation partnerships, and then with the internal team of the corporates along of the startups, and then also building overall open innovation culture in Switzerland, really kind of trying to see how can we work together and support even more, let's say, deep tech, and support also startups from abroad as well as locally, of course. We work in these verticals and focus areas that you can see in front. And when you look at circle economy or deep tech, this is basically touching all the verticals that we have kind of as an overall that we have been engaging with. Then we are, as I mentioned, spin-off of Impact Hub Zurich, and Impact Hub has around 100 locations all around the world. So we engage with them in many different levels to, of course, support each other, but also on the topics that I already mentioned, as well as supporting startups in Switzerland. And this is example of our corporates and organizations, because you might be asking, who are these partners that we could connect with? And so for us, it's a large, as you can see, for example, AXA, Coop, Mobiliar, Migros, and Swisscom. And then we also work with universities such as ETH and EPFL, and then also with public sector. So you can see cities, cantons, and foundations that we engage with on many different topics. From the circle economy that we launched also last year, we kind of focus on, I would say, to push really also sustainable projects. So it is that you can connect and say, hey, I'm interested to work on the pilot or commercial project in connection to your technology. But also if you're a CE startup, we kind of push through that on all the different levels. And then next to that, but not least, we also support in fundraising activities and investments. And so if you look at our alumni, they have raised over 300 million to this date. And these are some examples that you can see in front of you. I'm really happy there's not one that we just announced this week, which is Planted for over 17 million, which also has POCs with Coop, for example. But you can also see other examples like Bloco, Kaya, and Mapster. And then there were many different topics that we touched based on, from wide to engage in Switzerland, and that's why we're here. So I will not kind of reveal even more, because I already mentioned that in my presentation. I'm happy to answer any specific questions, as well as I know that George also has a great presentation as next. And this is my contact information if you would like to also reach out after the events. And that's pretty much it, because we are in this session mostly to support you in answering questions. So I would like to give my word to George with his presentation, and then answer questions as we go. So all good.
Super. Thank you, Katka. So I would also like to share a few slides about what we're doing in Photognosis and how we started. So in Photognosis actually started from people who have a background in medical applications, where we're trying to identify diseases and visualize them. And now what we're trying to do is to implement the same know-how in sensors for helping people in any space, like smart building style. So what do we do is that we install some sensors in closed spaces, and through these sensors, we're able to scan the area and collect information about the people, But the first and most important pillar of our vision is to maintain the privacy of all people in there. So we can, while maintaining this privacy, we're able to have a map of information about where there are people there, and if there is somebody who fainted, needs medical attention, assistance, and so on. So how do we do that? So the sensor is based on a combination of 3 different types of sensors: the visible, near infrared for temperature, and acoustic. And this allows to combine a lot of information from humans so that we don't really need the identity. So as you see here, we just keep the skeleton of the person, the posture, and so on, but we don't have any information about this person, the face, or we never capture, we never store. So this allows us to gather information, as I said, about how many people and where, about the posture of people, whether they're standing or sitting, demographics about their age or build. And long story short is that we collect a lot of information about also the well-being of people and identifying if people will need some help. As part of our, let's say, vision is to also look into health, not in order to spy on people, but to make the environment more safe. So helping people, or for example, screening for COVID symptoms. So here I'm showing some short videos on how this system can be used in vehicles to monitor the capacity of the vehicle or security. And in this case, second example, we identify if there is an accident or somebody fainted and might need help. So another more, let's say, today's need is the use for attending the capacity of buildings. Now with the COVID, there are some limitations. So this system not only will count the number of people within a room, but also will monitor the distance between people. And when it is violated, then it would autonomously send a message to the people that they need to keep the distance. And overall, our approach is that this system has to be totally autonomous to maintain the rules without any intervention. So the 3 pillars, as I said, I talked about the first one, which is to respect the privacy. The second is to be more as informative as possible. And the third one, to be autonomous, that it doesn't need supervision by a human. And of course, this can be a great tool for the times of pandemic, or when we want to control diseases like COVID. That was in short. If you need more information, feel free to visit our webpage, photognosis.com, or reach out to us. Thank you. Katka, back to you.
Thank you so much, George. Can you hear me? Can you see?
Yep.
Perfect, cool. So maybe now for everyone, we can start answering some questions. So maybe to see, feel free to maybe include that in the chat if you have any questions. Otherwise, maybe we can also answer some of the questions that were there from earlier today, which might be interesting to you. So, George, how do you feel that it's kind of easy for startups to enter Switzerland, maybe specifically connected to your technology?
Actually, yeah, I mean, the huge advantage of Switzerland when it comes to technology is that it's full of high-tech companies and startups. And actually, the country is not that big, so it's really easy to come in contact with other companies in your field. And not only startups and high tech, but also companies like, for example, we got connected to a company that manages fleets, bus fleets, and is one of the biggest in the world. And also the atmosphere feels a little bit like in a small country. Everybody's, let's say, approachable, easy to talk. So this was a big thing for me. I mean, just as a side note, I don't live in Switzerland, so I chose actively, so I put effort. I need to travel every day from neighboring country, from Germany, to come to Switzerland, but I definitely see that it's worth the effort. And that's the reason that I recommend it for others to come to Switzerland.
Fantastic, thank you. I think maybe there was really interesting question also about the data privacy earlier today. Could you maybe also answer that to say, what do you think is the problem, let's say, of the laws and the restrictions of the data that you can see in Switzerland next to other countries, maybe?
Good question. Yeah, actually, I wouldn't call it like it's a problem with the law. It's actually that the system works here. The people mentality is much closer to, let's say, total privacy respect, and the laws reflect that, and we're happy for that, because actually our goal, as I said, is to totally, let's say, respect the privacy of people. And actually, we have talked already to the authorities, which were very thorough in their investigation and questions about what we're doing and how could our system pose a threat for the privacy of people. Of course, we managed to address all the issues at the end. I mean, it was concluded that we don't even fall into this data privacy law, because actually we don't ever collect such data, so this never happens, and we take all measures to protect any data that we have. But we're happy about that, because actually our mindset is that we want to start from building our products around these strict laws that protect privacy, and with a certainty that if we're conformed with the Swiss laws, then we will be able to sell everywhere in the world, because they are some of the strictest in the world. So this is very fortunate for us.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic, thank you. I can see two additional questions here. One is, could you share a few scaled ventures from Kickstart? Yeah, so I mean, there's actually a lot. We have our alumni around 100 companies now for the last 5 years, and maybe the ones that you might know from the Swiss market will be Planted, Visu, which is more focusing on artificial intelligence. We had also Bloco, which is more focusing on blockchain, who joined us from the South Korea. We had a lot of amazing US startups in InsurTech, as well as in Smart City. And then I would say, it depends also on the connection of the topic. So we had also great experience with Statis, who is focusing on cybersecurity, based in Germany and basically scaling in Switzerland. Do you, maybe, George, do you have any examples of scaled ventures that you feel that you supported and you could mention?
Not really right now, on top of my head, not really.
Mm-hmm, cool. And then there is the next question. Will Kickstart work with North American companies to find collaboration opportunities with Swiss companies? Yes, definitely. We had a lot of startups coming from Northern American regions. As I mentioned, a lot of the focus was on EdTech, New Work, Smart City, FinTech, and InsurTech. So I would say it's definitely a lot of interesting opportunities. Only one challenge that I can see sometimes from the other regions is maybe in RegTech, because the regulations and the law structure is a little bit different. So this is not as easy for pilots and commercial projects. But I think anything connected to technology, to data, to services, to products, definitely scalable also. And it's good maybe entry also as a Switzerland, as a market entry to Europe. So there's definitely be a lot of our startups engaging on that way. Do you, George, maybe do you also engage with any of the North American companies?
We'll have some interaction there, yes. And actually, what I feel is that, just again, coming to the topic Switzerland, why Switzerland? Yeah. My impression is that really all over the world, not just North America, when you're talking about Switzerland, this is some sort of a seal of quality. Like they know that it is about quality work and everything will work. And as it was mentioned before, I mean, Switzerland has some of the best universities in the world, although it's not very well known. So, I mean, the employees that you can find here, the pool of people that you can find here is really top notch. And this reflects also to the impression of the people. So it makes a difference. I mean, I'm originally from Greece, and I know that if people will hear it's a startup from Greece, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not so secure about it, but Switzerland is something completely different. So this is one of the soft, parameters that come into play here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. I also got a lot of questions this morning, which maybe is good also to maybe tackle now. how are we influenced by COVID? George, are you guys how are you influenced? I'm sure you are, but in what stages to run your business, and how it has been for you, and what would you recommend maybe others in connections to Switzerland?
Well, actually, it's a tricky topic. Actually, it influenced our business in both ways. Like one is that we're not able to travel, and our job requires to travel and demo our products. On one hand, on the other hand, it increased the demand for our products. So this is generally about COVID. Now, coming to Switzerland, I think that Switzerland seems to keep a kind of balanced approach about the measures and the lockdown. So, I mean, it was less strict than Germany for a while, and we had a lot of debate within the company what would be the best way to handle it. I think that the current way of keeping the lockdown with the restrictions that they come along is the right way, because actually what we're looking forward is to get over with this thing and go back to normality. So definitely there are some restrictions now, but we think it's necessary. So, and we switched to almost total home office for all employees.
Yeah, maybe on comment for us, what we have done is that we accelerated, I would say, our digitalization. So most of our content actually is fully online since last year. And one of the really interesting learnings for us during the COVID year was that we actually announced the highest number of outcomes as a partnership last year. So we definitely missed kind of the personal interaction, I would say, to help with the deals. But we can also see that actually proof of concept and commercial projects and innovation in general can keep going, even if we are limited just to online interaction. So for us, we have been keep going on Kickstart, and basically that will not be different for this year. So if you're interested, definitely one of the maybe interesting platforms next to many others, from SGE to many others in Switzerland to engage with this year. And maybe that can also be good for you, because we all know that we are missing conferences for networking and finding the right connection. So this can also maybe help. And there's another question. How can interested startups apply to Kickstart program? So you can go to our website at kickstartinnovation.com, and we are launching on April 15th, and we'll love to see your application. The application will be open from April 15th. I think it's until May, actually. I think I misspoke earlier today. So it's from April to May, and you can just follow through the process. Now you can also pre-register, actually. So feel free to do that. And maybe, George, what is the best way how to engage with your organization and with you after this session?
I think the best is to go to the webpage, photognosis.com, and use this platform to send us a message, and we'll get back to them.
Fantastic. So let's see if there are any additional questions. It looks like it's a very efficient session this afternoon. So maybe what we can do is, I'll just see, but maybe I can put here in the chat my contact information. So if anybody has specific questions, you can also follow up with me. Otherwise, again, going on the website. And then George already mentioned the website, so maybe if you can type it in. Thank you, you already did. And if there are no further questions, I think we can wrap up this session. So thank you so much to George to run this together with me remotely. We never met in person, so this is great to see also that can work. And looking forward to being in touch with everyone. All the best.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
So good morning and good afternoon to everyone joining from Canada and from other parts of Europe. My name is Sarojini, and I'm part of the Swiss Business Hub Canada, and I'm responsible for investment promotion here in Canada. As part of our job, we're constantly interacting with a lot of tech companies, and protection of innovation is a very integral part of our discussions with companies. And therefore, to address this issue today we have on with us Florian Docomo. Florian is an IP and tech attorney and a legal entrepreneur. He founded HTC, which is a law firm that specializes in technology and innovation, in 2013. In this capacity, he has supported many tech companies over the years. He is also a co-founder of 3 startups, which means that he is very well equipped to understand from the perspective of an entrepreneur any issues or what regulatory and tax issues might come up. He also has a very diversified educational background. He has studied in Switzerland and Germany, and as well as in Canada, and he is an alumni of the McGill University in Canada. We're very happy to have Florian with us today, and we're sure that the presentation will be interesting and informative. So we're looking forward to your presentation, Florian. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and hello to everybody. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Can you see my screen now and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to talk to you about the protection and valuation of IP assets for tech scale-ups here in Switzerland. So thank you for the introduction. I'm an IP and tech attorney in Lausanne, Switzerland. And why Switzerland? Because Switzerland, as I said in the video, it has a very tech-supportive environment. Innovation is change that unlocks new value, said once Jamie Nutter. And Switzerland has this innovation culture, which is literally a virtuous circle where you have governmental support that also encourages entrepreneurs to bring effort and work and learning through universities and academia, which brings results, and then the circle continues, expands, and amplifies. I identified these six factors that actually makes Switzerland a nice place for innovation. First one is support to tech companies in terms of infrastructure. The second is a very good and foreseeable regulatory framework, thanks to this legislative approach in the forefront of innovation. Let me give you an example. 2017, 2018, there were many companies coming to Switzerland for issuing cryptocurrencies and using blockchain technology. So very quickly, the regulator issued some guidelines on how to consider this type of token issuance. And the Federal Council, the government, issued a very extensive report on the topic, considering amending the laws in order to encompass this new technology, and the law entered in force this year. I'm going to talk to you more extensively about it afterwards. Then the fourth element is governmental support for tech companies, and of course, as a place where we have a lot of financial institutions, banks, wealth managers, VCs, and private equity firms, there's great financing opportunities for startups and scale-ups, of course. And the ecosystem here is quite vibrant with multinational companies, SMEs, and startups, and the discussions on tech, and there's many events going on the tech issues. So let me talk to you a bit more about my topic, which is intellectual property. First of all, about the protection. IP protection serves really as the foundation of innovation in the Swiss economy. IP laws are designed to foster this innovation and to reduce the transaction costs between inventors and industry by providing information about the invention. In terms of statistics, there's more than 130,000 patents in force in Switzerland at the moment, which makes it the country with the most patent applications per million of inhabitants. Number of patent applications reached an all-time high of 988 in 2019. And in the list of countries who submitted the most applications in 2019 was Switzerland ranks 7th with only 8 million inhabitants in total. So for patent law, with respect to patent law, there's a really 5-step patent protection process. Filing, of course, the application, which includes a request as well as technical documents to be submitted, and an examination that will last during 18 months. And after 18 months, the patent application will be either rejected or accepted, and then the patent will be published with a priority period of 12 months in all Paris Convention countries. The substantive examination of the patent is really based on the technical documents, and you can always request an accelerated substantive examination that will allow you to actually obtain the results within the priority period. So within 12 months, you can get an initial input on your patent application, which is quite fast compared to other countries. So the patent is valid for 20 years, and it's published online and in the patent register. So the substantive examination will go through mainly the technical character of the invention. Does it solve a problem using technical means? And the grounds for refusal will be basically mostly formal. Is the invention presented in such a way that a person skilled in the art can understand it? Can the scope of protection being claimed be clearly understood, so that you need to have clarity in the description? Uniformity, are the patent claims linked through a common inventive concept? Do modifications go beyond the content of the original technical documents? And do the technical documents meet the formal requirements? So mainly the examination will be from a technical aspect and formal. And the Swiss Patent Office does not examine the novelty and inventive step. So you can ask for prior art research, which costs something like 500 francs, but it's a separate prior art research, which does not come into play for granting the patent. So the cost here for application 200, examination fee 500 francs, and then for each claim, additional claim, 50 francs, accelerated examination 200. So the costs are not extremely high for being granted a patent. Corporate law now. So as I said in the video, we have a new Corporate Act entered in force on April 2020. And as you may know, Switzerland is the seat of the Berne Convention, which is the early corporate protection convention. So what's protected? Computer programs, works of literature, art, neighboring rights of performing artists, producers, and broadcasting companies. How does it become protected? Automatically at the moment of creation, and the protection will be the life of the author or the public performance plus 70 years. And for software, it's the life of the developer plus 50 years. So also worth noting is that in Switzerland, copyrights to software will be automatically assigned to the employer by law. And the minimum requirement for copyright protection will be an individual character of the work or of the code. But for photographs now, they're protected irrespective whether they have or not individual character. Design law. So designs are protected if, to the extent that it is new and has individual character as well. And no individual character is recognized if the overall impression of the design it produces differs only in immaterial features from an existing design. So there's a lot of case law for watches here in Switzerland, and for designs to watches, but other industries as well. And the duration of protection for designs is 5 years, and maybe extended for 4 periods of 5 years each. So I'm going to talk to you now about IP valuation. I think that's an important topic. To be able to value your IP asset, the asset should meet, in my opinion, the following conditions. It should be, well, separately identifiable, circumvented, which is subject to specific identification and recognizable description of the IP asset. There should be tangible evidence of the existence of the assets, so a contract, a license, registration document, or simply financial statements, balance sheet showing that the asset has been activated. Should have been created at an identifiable point in time. It should be capable of being legally enforced and transfer assigned. Its income stream should be isolated from those of other business assets, if possible. The asset should be able to be sold independently of other business assets, and it should be subject to destruction or termination at an identifiable point in time. So these are, for me, the prerequisite to be able to value an IP asset. And valuing the IP asset has many advantages. First, for licensing or franchising UIP, you need to be able to define what license fee is going to be paid, and that will allow you to better adapt your contracts. Evaluating also IP asset will allow you to negotiate with academia, universities, institutes for tech transfer, know-how agreements. It will, of course, allow you to attract partners, but also to secure financing using the IP asset as a collateral for getting financing. And it's also useful to decide whether it's worth settling or not settling some disputes or some oppositions to your IP, and some oppositions to some claims that may be currently challenged. So valuation methods, there's 3 main methods for valuing IP. One is the income method, which values IP asset on the basis of the amount of economic income that it is expected to generate, adjusted to its present day value. The market method. The market method is based on a comparison with the actual price paid for the transfer right of a similar IP asset under comparable circumstances. So you need to have comparables to apply this method. And the cost method is establish the value of an IP asset by calculating the cost of a similar IP asset. The cost method is useful when the IP can be easily reproduced and when the economic benefits of the asset cannot be accurately quantified. So these are the 3 methods, and you also have to take into account, of course, the R&D cost that have been invested in the specific IP asset. Let me now talk a bit about this blockchain act and IP and how it could relate to IP. First of all, I just want to explain to you how the Swiss regulator classifies tokens issued on the blockchain. So mainly there's a difference between native and non-native tokens. Native tokens are tokens that represent value on-chain, so on the blockchain only, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Tezos, which are issued by a blockchain protocol. And non-native tokens are tokens which represent value located outside the blockchain in the physical world. So let's say token that represents a piece of art or some type of property titles. Fungible, non-fungible tokens. So this is a topic that you may have heard, NFTs, which stands for non-fungible tokens. That means that these tokens are not transferable, not negotiable on secondary markets, and fungible tokens are negotiable. So basically, this has an impact on the qualification of the token in terms of securities law. Security asset tokens are tokens that represent shares, bonds, derivatives. In Switzerland now, we can issue shares of companies using blockchain technology and have the securities incorporated into tokens rather than physical certificates. Utility tokens are basically access rights to future service and services or products. So a company that has a platform, you can access the platform using its tokens. These are called utility tokens. Payment tokens are proper cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, like cryptocurrencies that can be used as payment means of payment. And there could be hybrid tokens with several functionalities. So the regulator will check what are the characteristics and functionalities of the token to be able to qualify legally the token. And FINMA issued also some guidelines on stable coins. So stable coins are basically cryptocurrencies pegged with fiat currencies or with physical gold or other type of storage of value. And finally, CBDC stands for Central Bank Digital Currency. And this is the digital money issued by central banks. There's project to issue such money in China, in Europe, but also in Switzerland. So basically, the new DLT legal framework entered in force last February 1st, and the major change is that it allows transfer of rights, including potentially IP rights, license rights, using distributed ledger technology. So by transfer of right, I mean assignment of the rights. And until now, for assigning IP rights, you needed to have a written document with signature by hand to be able to assign the right. With this new law, you can assign this using a digital technology and the blockchain. So this paves the way for tokenization of all type of assets and rights, basically. And next August, September, it's not defined yet, but there's going to be a new financial infrastructure using the blockchain for trading securities and for clearing and settlement. So this really changes the way capital markets will function and really integrates distributed ledger technology in the finance ecosystem. Finally, I will talk about taxation. So I mentioned in the video, there's a patent box for SMEs active in research, development, and innovation, allowing basically these type of companies to deduct the research and development costs, but also the license fees from Swiss and foreign patents up to 90%, which has corresponding tax advantages. And the income tax will range from 20.5% to 22.5%, basically, depending on the canton where the company is located in Switzerland. But this is quite interesting for tech companies because it's lower than pretty much all the OECD countries in terms of taxes, corporate income tax. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any question you may have. You have my details here. Do not hesitate to connect me on LinkedIn and keep in touch. I post quite a lot of things on these topics that I'm very passionate about.
Thank you, Florian. At this time, we'll open up the discussion for Q&A. If you have any questions, please feel free to type it in the chat box, and we'll be able to, and Florian will be able to address them. Okay, maybe I can start off with one question that comes up very often. Florian, we normally speak with a lot of young tech startups, and they're based in anywhere in the world, and they're looking probably to come to Europe and possibly Switzerland to set up their operations. So the question is that if they're doing a lot of their initial work in another country and a lot of R&D effort has gone into this into their product in this country, when they want to move to Switzerland and they want to sort of register their IP there and manage their IP from Switzerland, does any amount of key functions need to be allocated to Switzerland? What part of this R&D can be sort of attached to the Swiss entity? How do they go about doing this transition? Does that impact where they've done their previous R&D for their IP?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. I think if the IP is protected in another country, then you can assign it through an assignment agreement to the Swiss entity, and then basically that's a contract with the Swiss entity and the foreign entity, and then benefit from the patent box for license fees that would be generated by this IP. If the IP rights are not protected, but there's some work that has been done already, some research, then potentially you can evaluate this and use that as an in-kind for incorporating the Swiss company. So that could be based on an evaluation of an accounting expert. You can use this work, evaluate it, and use that as in-kind for the company incorporation. Company incorporation in Switzerland, you need to have 20,000 Swiss francs for LLCs and at least 50,000 for limited companies. So that could be useful to have some assets to put that as an in-kind for the incorporation. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much. Is there any other question that anybody would like to address? Okay, maybe just one last question that also has come up. In terms of adaptability or portability of these regulations, if a company based in Switzerland wants to use Switzerland as a base to deal with their clients all over Europe, what does that mean in terms of if you're covered by these regulations in Switzerland? How are you protected when you also deal with the rest of Europe?
You mean the blockchain regulations I talked about?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Basically, if the entity is based in Switzerland, the ledger will be held by this entity. So let's say you want to issue your shares using the blockchain. The shareholders' ledger held using distributed ledger technology will be held by the Swiss entity, and that will be basically run by Swiss law. So that's feasible. If let's say the token encapsulates IP rights or licenses, then also that will be operated by the Swiss entity that owns or that holds these IP rights and that licenses out to other companies in Europe. So I think the fact of being located here in the center of Europe will allow you then to use this technology for improving, the processes for IP valuation and IP protection, and also transfer of rights or license.
Thank you. We have one other question. If a company wants to launch a cryptocurrency in Switzerland, What sort of steps and measures should they take? Can they engage a regulator in advance as a part of their evaluation of where to set up and launch?
Yes. So basically, that's one aspect which is interesting for Switzerland as well. You can talk with the regulator. It's not like let's say in the US, the SEC. You can expose to the regulator how you interpreted what's your appreciation of the case of the cryptocurrency to be issued, and they will validate with a no action letter. That takes up to 3 months, basically, at the moment with the workload. But it's really good because you can issue your cryptocurrency without having to fear some enforcement measures afterwards. Basically, for foreign companies, because I advised many on this topic, for foreign companies to come to Switzerland, the initial step is to have a bank account. And open a bank account in Switzerland. You will go through due diligence, KYC and stuff. And basically being active in the crypto sphere was difficult back in 2018 to get a bank account. But now there's crypto banks that are regulated by FINMA and that are keen on opening bank accounts for crypto companies. So first step is open a bank account with this type of crypto bank, then incorporate the company, and then I do in all these type of cases a legal assessment of what is going to be issued. Is it a financial instrument? Is it a security? And basically, based on this legal assessment, then it's quite easy then to have this coin issued if you follow the recommendations. Basically, does that answer your question, Daniel?
Yes, I think it was quite clear, your response. Thank you so much. So if there are no other questions at this stage, I'd like to sum up and thank you very much for your presentation today. What is definitely a takeaway is that technology and regulations are working relatively well hand in hand in Switzerland. We can definitely say it's a little bit ahead of the curve if you compare global standards. And the second important takeaway is that regulatory authorities in Switzerland are much more open-minded. They're able to engage in a more discussion-oriented view rather than sort of an authoritarian point of view at this point in time, which is definitely a plus point for a lot of young startups looking to scale up. We're very happy to take additional questions also offline. Please feel free to write to us or to Florian to get responses in the future as well. Thank you very much for your time and for joining us today. And thank you as well, Florian.
Thank you very much. And I will just share my details in the chat because this morning that was requested. And do not hesitate to keep in touch. I'm happy to continue discussions offline. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Hello, and a warm welcome to the breakout session, Scaling AI in Your Company. My name is Claudia. I'm a colleague to Silpa, however, not based in Zurich, but in Stuttgart at the Swiss Consulate. Today, I'm very delighted that Nicole and Joanna from Marantix Labs have accepted our invitation. Unfortunately, Nicole just informed that she couldn't make it because there was a serious other topic. So, but I'm sure Joanna will do it even same or even better. And you've met Nicole in the introduction already. So I don't need to introduce Marantix anymore because it was done. For your information, Joanna will present the next 15 minutes and then we have a Q&A session afterwards. But please, if the presentation is on and you have a question, write it in the chat. We can then take care of it afterwards. So nothing more from my side. Joanna, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Claudia, very much for the introduction. And thanks for having me to talk about scaling AI and to talk about Marantix Labs. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. I hope this is interesting to you. And as Claudia said, if you have any questions, just write them in the chat and we can answer them, I think, in the end of on my presentation. I would be also curious to hear from you about maybe your experiences, and maybe we can have a discussion there. So yes, so let's move on to the presentation. I'd just quickly like to introduce myself. You've already seen Nicole in the pre-recorded video. My name is Johanna, and I work on the business team at Marantix Labs, and I work with clients throughout the whole journey of AI use case ideation, development, implementation, and scaling. And I've also been working a lot on the AI canvas that Nicole already introduced, which I'm also gonna introduce to you in a bit more detail. So just to give a little bit of context, because before we dive a bit deeper, why artificial intelligence? Right, so we believe at Marantix and Marantix Labs that AI is the next disruptive general purpose technology, similarly to software in the 1970s and the internet in the 1990s. We believe that AI will really be adopted across all different sectors in the next decades to come. It's already starting to happen, but we really believe that it's going to be this kind of general purpose technology. However, it's still not, let's say, fully understood, and many companies struggle to unlock the business value that AI actually can create, the potential that AI has. So even though AI will add almost $16 trillion to the world economy before 2030, approximately 65% of companies actually have no comprehensive AI strategy, and even more, 78% of companies have no or limited AI capabilities. So this is where we come in as Marantix Labs. We are basically a one-stop shop for AI solution. We bring, as Nicole also mentioned, we bring a lot of this research that's being done, right? There's a lot of new research coming up all the time from top universities. So we bring that research and implement it to actual business cases that are based on AI. To give a bit of a picture of how Marantix and Marantix Labs work. So Marantix Labs is part of the wider Marantix universe. Marantix is a AI venture building studio, as you've heard from Nicole, and we take in founders who are experts in their domains or technical experts in AI, and who then build companies focusing, product companies that have a really strong AI component. So as an example, right, we have Vara that's focusing on medical imaging in the breast cancer sphere. We have SIA Search that's focusing on autonomous driving systems. We have Causa, which is focusing on KPI and performance, business intelligence. We have Cambrium focusing on biotech, and then many more in the making in the healthcare sector, financial sector, focusing on sustainability, etc. Then there's Marantix Labs. So we are kind of the operational arm of Marantix. So we don't have a product, but we work with companies from different sizes and different sectors, industries, on really bringing AI into their core. So not just to build prototypes, but to actually kind of transform also on the strategic level to be able to source AI use cases and develop them internally. Although we are based in Berlin, we have quite a strong connection to Switzerland as well. So some of our founders are Swiss, and we also have a lot of talent from Switzerland. We have strong connection to University of St. Gallen, which I'll talk about a bit later as well. And we also work with some clients in Switzerland, based in Switzerland. So just to show you in a bit more concrete way, before we dive into the problem of scaling, to show you how our projects generally look like, we work with clients throughout the whole process, as I mentioned. So not just like taking their data and developing software, but we also help them identify AI-driven business opportunities that will bring the most impact. Then we move to the next stage of actually prototyping and creating kind of a first version of the product or of the solution that they're trying to implement. And then there's, of course, this decision gate, right? Do we actually want to go through with this project or not? And if yes, we move into the scaling part, which is where most of the challenges actually happen. However, of course, you need to keep the scaling part in your mind throughout this whole process. And to give you a bit of a concrete example, sorry, okay, now it moved. So to also show you what types of problems we work on, right? So the main technologies we work with are computer vision, natural language processing, and then forecasting, so based on regression. And some of the cases, for example, are visual quality control. So this is kind of an algorithm that classifies online returns to determine whether they're damaged or not, whether they have been worn or not. We have an example for natural language processing, for example, working with a company on their customer reviews. So scraping the reviews of their services and then extracting relevant information that's kind of being done continuously to spot trends, sentiments, and then also help them, right, with designing, let's say, new marketing strategies or new strategies for customer targeting. And then one of the examples for forecasting is sales conversion estimation. So this is a use case where we work with a manufacturing client and basically help them with lead prioritization. So looking at their CRM data and seeing, okay, which leads are likely to churn and which should we follow. So that's kind of to give you an overview of what types of problems we work with, and they're very diverse and different, right? And we have seen throughout our engagements that the challenges that companies face are quite similar, independently of what sector they're in, what industry, what type of product they have, or what type of solution they actually want to work on. So we saw that these challenges tend to be quite similar. And that is why we actually partnered up with University of St. Gallen with the computer science department there and developed this AI canvas, which serves as a strategic tool for AI development and scaling to address these challenges and to help companies approach this topic in a very structured way. Because of course, right, AI it's kind of a hype. Everyone's talking about it. A lot of people have misconceptions about it, but it's really important, and we've seen this again and again, to really approach this topic in a structured, strategic manner, and also with a lookout for the future, to make sure that the projects are sustainable and that they actually are efficient also in a few years, not just for the, let's say, prototype phase for the first few months. So to give you a little bit of an overview of the AI canvas, Nicole already mentioned it, but I'd like to actually show you how we use it. So of course, this tool, right, it's there are many canvases. There is a business lean canvas, there is a value proposition canvas, and this AI canvas has been designed with kind of the nature of AI, the iterative nature of AI, and also with the fast change in the field of AI in mind. So of course you could use it in a very brief way of just kind of looking into these fields and writing, one sentence just to get an overview. But we like to use it as a starting point with our clients, when we kind of plan the whole, right, engagement, plan the whole strategy. So as you can see here on this slide, the canvas has main 4 parts. One of them is business, then organization, then technology plus data, and then the AI lifecycle. This is one level lower, so the canvas has 3 levels, and you can see that within the business part, we focus on kind of looking at what is the value proposition of the software or the solution that we're actually trying to build. How do we measure its success? Then looking into the organization, right? How do we set up the organization so that information flows well and that the right people are involved? Then data and technology. So which type of data do we have? Which technology are we going to use? Operational implication focuses more on the kind of regulatory and safety security part. And as I mentioned, right, we use this tool on different levels. So you can use it as a very simple tool to just like write in a few words, but we use it as a first touch point at the beginning of a project where we work, let's say, in a workshop format. And then later on, when we actually move on with the project, we use it to iterate and also to keep on track with all the topics and make sure that we do not keep any of the topics abandoned, because AI projects are not just about putting in data and coming to a result. They really have a lot of different areas around them. So just to show you, right, when looking at the business part, we really want to make sure that companies, I mean, this could seem quite straightforward, but you would be surprised at how often it actually happens that companies don't really think about the actual value that the algorithm will bring. So we think it's really important to align strategic business objectives and AI development. So how to do this, right? You can look at your financial statements for where your company is securing the highest cost. Look at the strategies, be it in customer retention, marketing, other processes. Look at if there is a way to improve these processes with AI, and really make sure to spend enough time identifying AI-driven business cases and prioritize them by business impact and technical feasibility. So if you start with a business case, you allow to measure your AI projects from also a financial perspective, and you're not just coming up with a solution to a non-existing problem, let's say. So this is just a show of how we would kind of approach this in a workshop setting. And then when you understand the problem, you can of course move further into the customer user of the tool, look at the journey, identify the product, maybe partners who are necessary to actually build this software. Moving on to the organizational part. So this one actually is really important. And one of the ways that we're looking at is that it's really important to, sorry, I think my slide has moved. There we go. Is to look at, right, to set up your organizational capabilities to support AI development. And what this means is that companies have to approach AI in a holistic manner and assure that the organizational setup, but also internal knowledge, is up to date. As an example, right, so something that's emerged in the past years, and we see it also with our client, is that just due to the fast-paced progress of machine learning, the organizations, especially more traditional ones, can have a hard time kind of keeping up with all this information. As an example, one of our clients, a large multinational company, they actually had machine learning capabilities in-house, but they were scattered across the whole company. So each vertical, each department was working on their specific use cases. They would, for example, set up the cloud over and over again, make the same mistakes, not really share their learnings. So they basically ended up reinventing the wheel over and over again without sharing any resources. And it's been found, I mean, this is, of course, dependent on what type of organization you are. Are you a startup? Are you a corporation? But it's been found in research, but also from our experience, that kind of looking at this setup is really important. We generally work with this hybrid setup where you have a central unit that kind of communicates with different departments and the leadership as well. And this can lead to many benefits, such as more powerful models, capability building, talent sharing, project scalability. etc. So of course, as mentioned, there are many ways of approaching this, but we use the canvas to get a deeper understanding of the existing organizational setup through exercises such as stakeholder mapping or technical and talent capability mapping. So that's for the organizational part. And now quickly also looking at time, I'd just like to mention a few points for the topic of data and technology, right? Because for data, a lot of companies collect, right, so much data and ideally would like to use all of it, but very often the data quality is not maybe so high, or the data sets are not connected. So this is something to really keep in mind from the beginning of the project to make sure that there is some data strategy in mind. So we do this, we start usually with data mapping, where we identify kind of the existing setup and see where do we need to, let's say, improve the quality or increase the amount of data. And from there, we move on with kind of the data scientist tasks, right? So this is either done at the clients, or we actually also help them. Our engineering team actually also helps them with this topic. And one important part actually is also the operational implications here on the right. So the topics of governance, compliance, regulation, safety, security. This is something, again, that you kind of need to have an interdisciplinary team, right, to focus on these topics, especially in terms of regulation. There's not that much AI regulation yet, but for example, the European Commission is now drafting a first draft of an AI regulation, which is going to be similar, let's say, to the GDPR regulation, but with focus on AI applications. So of course, it's also important to keep this in mind for the future, to make sure that your models are, explainable to a certain extent, or that your models can actually be understood by others revising them. So we keep all these topics, many topics, I know, and it is quite a complex team. But that's why we kind of like to put it on this canvas all at the same time, to make sure that none of these topics are avoided when starting these discussions, because the projects or these initiatives can very easily go from small projects to company-wide initiatives, and then all these components are very important to address. We do this kind of through this AI lifecycle, so to make sure that you can iterate on your outcomes, you can iterate on your ideas, you can move from one section to the other very easily. And this is one of the infographics we have to stress that with these AI projects, it's really important to remain agile to a certain extent, to be able to experiment, develop, operate, and then come back in case either something goes wrong or the strategic outlook changes. I think I have one last slide to just show this is an overview of how one of our initial workshops before actually moving on from before actually moving to the project. So we would kind of plan all these, map all these topics, and then after having an idea of where the company is standing, we then move on to the actual software development and also helping the company with setting up their internal structures, be it on the organization level, on the technical infrastructure level, to actually be able to do this on their own later on. So that is all from me. I know it's a lot of information. If you are interested in discussing any of this in further detail, don't feel free to contact me afterwards. But I think we now have some time to also answer any questions. So if you have any, let us know in the chat.
Joanna, thank you very much for this really interesting presentation and the insights to a really holistic methodology. So it's really, I pass it on now to the chat. If there are any questions, please write it in, and Joanna is happy to answer everything, not everything, but but most. While we wait for you to write in the questions, maybe I ask one question. You presented the four blocks of the methodology, technology, organization, and the life cycle. What, from your experience, is the most challenging? If you look at companies which exist, or family companies, so no startups, but the company.
Yeah, that's a difficult question. Because there are challenges in each of the blocks, I would say. I think from my perspective, what we see, right, the typical challenges of, I think, kind of data, not having enough data, not having good quality data, that's one of the ones we see very often, especially in, let's say, these family companies or also larger companies. So one of them would be lack of data. Other one, of course, lack of talent, especially in Europe. Sometimes it's difficult to get machine learning talent or people who actually understand the topic. So that's also something we see quite often, and where we also try to encourage people to kind of develop talent internally. And I think another topic which we see very often is kind of related to most of the blogs, but it's actually the topic of trust in the technology, right? And kind of education about the technology. So I wouldn't say it's part of one or the other blogs, but we see this very often, and it's something that requires also educational programs, but also communication strategies internally and externally to kind of make sure that people understand what the technology is for, that it's not here to replace someone, but maybe to enhance someone's work. So this is something we see very often.
So it's not just the technological aspect and the experts, but really the whole view of an organization.
Yeah.
But now I see there is a question in the chat, which I read now. Which one of those topics from the canvas do you think is the most crucial in building and scaling AI in a company?
I think that's the point of the canvas. There's no one thing that's the most crucial. It's that all of them are really important to be kind of developed at the same time or dependent on each other. Because if you only focus on one of the components, you're very soon going to realize that you're missing something and you cannot scale. So that's why we actually also came up with this tool, because we would very often see people, let's say, focusing only on the technology, but then they would have difficulties convincing the board that this is actually a solution they should finance further, because there was no clear business value. So it's really the integration of all these topics that makes the initiatives successful, let's say.
Okay, thank you. Then there was a comment which I read: intrigued by the integration of a fair amount of design thinking concepts into your process. Seems like a very sound platform for companies to branch into more AI applications in their organizations.
Thank you very much, Michelle. That's very nice to hear. Would be happy to chat about it later on as well, if you want to reach out.
Okay, and then there was a question from Michael. We speak to companies in North America that apply AI in their product solutions. If these companies establish an office in Switzerland, does Marantix have a way of helping these companies scale in Switzerland to tackle the European market?
So that's an interesting question, and also something we touched upon a little bit in the morning, right, Claudia? So Marantix is actually based in Europe, in Berlin, but we're kind of have a European-wide network. So we're focusing on the DACH region, but also expanding to other European countries. I wouldn't say that we have direct way to help companies establish an office in Switzerland. However, we are opening up this AI campus, which is a space to kind of share AI knowledge, but also cohabitate with other AI startups. However, that one is based in Berlin. So it doesn't, right, like the maybe outlook is slightly different because it's still in Germany, but there's also a very strong connection to Switzerland with our business.
Okay, so internationalize AI services and products is it part of the AI lifecycle, or is it not touched in a way?
I mean, right, this is something, it would be a part of it could be part of the AI lifecycle, because also you have different regulations in different parts of the world, different data regulations. So it's definitely something that plays a role. Maybe I misunderstood the question. I understood if we could actually kind of help with this with the presence in Switzerland. But I think overall, right, internationalizing AI, of course, we're happy to collaborate also on this. And that's kind of the also purpose of the AI campus, to make it an AI hub for Europe and also bring companies from abroad, from other continents to start off in Europe and maybe offer their services here. So for sure, but I was just trying to point out that it's not specifically Switzerland focused, but also includes Switzerland in the wider ecosystem, yes.
And maybe a last question for me. Now, you mentioned the campus. I heard this morning that you're just opening a campus in Berlin. Would you like to say some words about that project?
Yes, we're all very excited about this project, and it's so yes, it's the AI campus, and it's a place for companies, universities, also right, different departments, let's say government innovation departments, to kind of share AI knowledge and really create this AI ecosystem in Europe. So it's a hub for AI in Europe, and it's a physical space. So it's a office sharing space, but also event space. And it's really a place to bring different minds together and kind of develop a strong AI brand in Europe.
Okay, sounds really, really fascinating. So wish you luck for good development.
Thank you. Yeah, feel free to also have a look at the website of the campus. It's if you're interested.
Now I see a last question or another question. What about the University of St. Gallen?
Okay, I'm not sure what that
maybe
question.
it's the link with your corporation, which
right. I mean, yes. So we are working with them on the concept of the AI canvas. So really, the framework is co-developed by us at University of St. Gallen, because we're kind of combining this both academic and also industry experience, and really working with kind of the top researchers and practitioners in the field. So we work with University of St. Gallen on the kind of the conceptual development of this, and deepening it, and making sure that that it stays relevant and up to date as we progress with the technology.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe we take this as the last question. Best way to contact you?
Yes, I can share my LinkedIn account here, if you just give me a second. And please feel free to get in touch with me there. I would be happy to connect. Always happy to connect and chat about your experiences, and maybe also potential ways to share, right? To share some knowledge. So just give me a second. I'll share it here with you.
Okay, so one last round or one last question to the chat. Are there any further questions? Is there anything you still need to know right now? If it's not the case, then I think we're done already. Joanna, thank you very much for your time and for opening up a bit your doors and let us have insights to your company and the way you work. Also, thanks to everybody in the audience, the viewers, for your time. And yes, take care and wish you a nice evening, and hope we see us in the next seminar too. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.